Amelia Island celebrates live music, dancing, and fun on the first Friday of every month from April through October, skipping July, with Sounds on Center. Season kicks off on April 4th. Info at ameliaisland.com/sounds. The North Florida TPO is committed to shaping our transportation future. We're focused on planning, funding, clean fuels, and new technologies for a vibrant, connected community. Learn more at northfloridatpo.com. Baptist Health is a proud supporter of First Coast Connect. Baptist Health, committed to building a healthier community for all of us. More info at 202-4YOU or baptistjacks.com.
This is WJCT News 89.9 Jacksonville. Up next, national and local news from NPR and the WJCT News team.
Good morning. I'm Ann Schindler. On today's First Coast Connect, following news of a 2.5-year shutdown and widespread layoffs, we ask the CEO of MOSH about the museum's plans for the future. Then, a new sheriff's office initiative aims to get ahead of missing persons cases before they occur. We preview the Pepper Project and the dramatic power of high expectations. We talk to the actors behind a new performance of My Fair Lady. Join the conversation. Give us a call at 904-549-2937. You can also email First Coast Connect at wjct.org or tag us on social media. It's all ahead this hour after the day's news.
Live from NPR News in Washington, I'm Corva Coleman. Russia launched dozens of drone attacks across Ukraine overnight, killing at least one person and injuring nearly 24 more. The attacks effectively mark Russia's rejection of calls by Kyiv and its European allies for an immediate ceasefire ahead of possible peace talks later this week. From Moscow, NPR's Charles Maines has more.
According to Ukrainian officials, Russia launched more than 100 drones across multiple regions of Ukraine beginning late Sunday. Russia's defense ministry confirmed the attacks, but said its forces struck a range of military targets, including Ukrainian army air bases and arms depots. Ukraine, with backing from the U.S. and Europe, had been demanding Monday mark the start of a month-long ceasefire, threatening massive new sanctions should Russia refuse. Instead, Russian President Vladimir Putin called for direct talks with Ukraine in Istanbul, Turkey later this week in an apparent attempt to seize the diplomatic initiative. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has since agreed to the talks but challenged Putin to meet in person. Charles Maines, NPR News, Moscow.
House Republicans have released an initial proposal for parts of their budget, and it includes general ideas about Medicaid. NPR's Elena Moore says the GOP is looking to slash federal spending.
GOP members have to come up with $1.5 trillion in proposed savings or cuts to offset the cost of things like making Trump's 2017 tax cuts permanent. That's about a quarter of annual federal spending. And some conservative Republicans say one way of getting there is restructuring some programs like Medicaid. But moderate Republicans who face competitive re-election races next year are very much against massive changes to the program.
NPR's Elena Moore reporting. President Trump says he'll sign an executive order today that he claims will cut prescription drug prices between 30% and 80%. He hasn't explained how. Trump tried to do this in his first administration but was blocked by federal courts. The program was later ended by then-President Biden. Dozens of white South Africans are en route to the U.S. after being given refugee status by the Trump administration. As Kate Bartlett reports from Johannesburg, the South African government is dismissing their claims.
The group of Afrikaners, the descendants of mainly Dutch colonists, left Johannesburg on a U.S. government charter flight on Sunday night. They were given refugee status after President Trump signed an executive order saying the minority group faced persecution at home. The South African government firmly denies that.
There are no legal or any factual basis for the executive order sanctioning this action. None of the provisions of international law on the definition of refugees are applicable in this case.
That was Vincent Magwenya, spokesman for the presidency. For NPR News, I'm Kate Bartlett in Johannesburg.
On Wall Street in pre-market trading, the Dow futures are up 1,000 points. It's NPR.
You're listening to WJCT News 89.9 in Jacksonville. Good morning. I'm Stephen Ponson. It's 9:04. Atlantic Beach is expanding a lightning alert system on its beachfront at the Ahern Street Beach Access in Russell Park. The systems predict lightning strikes by analyzing electrostatic energy in the atmosphere, then providing warnings up to 20 minutes before a potential lightning strike. When lightning is sensed, these systems issue a 15-second horn blast and a white strobe light continuing to flash until the threat has passed. The systems are already in place at the 6th and 15th Street beach accesses and operate between 8 in the morning and 9 p.m. daily. For the first time ever, the University of North Florida softball team is going to the NCAA Division I softball tournament. The team will play in the Columbia Regional in South Carolina this weekend. The first game is Friday at 3 p.m. against the University of Virginia. The Ospreys won the Atlantic Sun Tournament over the weekend, defeating Eastern Kentucky University in the championship game 5-4. Other Florida schools to make the tournament are the University of Florida, Florida State, the University of Central Florida, University of South Florida, and Florida Atlantic. Have the umbrella today here in Northeast Florida. Numerous storms and showers expected through the late afternoon hours, and we do have the chance for severe storms today as well. Rain chances decrease later on in the evening. Highs will reach the lower 80s today. Overnight, we'll have lows getting down into the mid to upper 60s.
Is NPR.
Support for NPR comes from NPR stations. Other contributors include Charles Schwab, offering investors choices like full-service wealth management, advice, investing, and trading on Thinkorswim. Learn more at schwab.com. And from the Doris Duke Foundation.
City's premier learning museum following the surprise announcement of MOSH's extended closure ahead of its move. We ask the CEO what happens between now and then. Later in the program, solving a missing persons case with prevention and a dog named Pepper. We'll tell you about a new safety initiative for those with Alzheimer's and dementia. But first, the Museum of Science and History announced plans for a lengthy shutdown before its planned relocation. It was news that raised many questions and concerns for the staff, the community, and fans of MOSH's programming. Here to tell us what led to that decision and its impact is Dr. Al Dove, Museum CEO. Good morning, Al.
Good morning. It's a pleasure to be here.
It is so nice to have you. How did you feel about making this announcement?
Yeah, obviously this is a huge decision in the history of MOSH, although not unprecedented. We've moved before. The museum opened in 1941 in Riverside, and it didn't move to the current Museum Circle location until 1969. So it's not unprecedented, but it is obviously a huge decision and a sort of a watershed moment in the history of the place. So it was really important that it be a decision that everybody in leadership get right so that we can look after the health of the organization and continue to serve the people of Jacksonville.
And so the move is certainly big news, but the fact that the museum is going to have this, almost 2.5-year shutdown, and the fact that it's going to impact a lot of employees of the museum is a whole different kettle of fish.
Yeah, obviously the staff impact one is probably the hardest part of the whole equation. But if I can tell you a little bit about how we sort of reached the decision, that's important to me that the listeners understand that, because it's something that we've been sort of wrangling with for almost 6 months, I think. Different scenario modeling, various members of the board and members of senior leadership sort of trying to evaluate when is the optimal time to close the old museum and focus 100% of our energies on creating the new museum. And so we sort of we started with a 2-day immersive workshop where we did nothing but think about these questions and sort of look at how do we balance our need to deliver our mission, our educational mission, against sort of the financial health of the organization and the need to focus on creating the new museum. But a lot of it is also sort of about the sequencing of things. So the timing of closing in September 1st, if people are not aware of that date, September the 1st will be the first day of closure. A lot of that's about we need to allow time to decommission the current museum before we break ground on the new museum in spring. And so these sort of sequencing of events sort of line up. And then after the spring, we'll be 100% all in on creating the new museum experience.
So when you talk about decommissioning the museum, I want you to explain a little bit more what that entails. But what else goes into the consideration? I mean, I'm wondering if there is a cost, obviously, that goes to maintaining a museum that perhaps you're looking at. Would that money be better spent, sandbagging that for, either the efforts on the new museum or the preparation for the new museum? There may be maintenance that the old building needs that it's cheaper to avoid doing that now and kind of, again, save that money aside. What were some of the financial um, rationales that you were like mulling over?
Yeah, so I would say D, all of the above. So all of those things, right? So we did a lot of scenario modeling. So we planned everything from what happens if we close today, just today, to what happens if we stay open all the way till the day before the new museum opens, and everything in between. And so, laying out those different scenarios and trying to evaluate what is the financial impact of those, and how do we weigh that financial impact against the mission impact of not being open, and then the risks of continuing operations in, as you recognize, an aging building. So we have to be able to balance all of those things. And so thankfully we had really great people involved. The museum's CFO, we have some very talented trustees who are able to lend their expertise and help us really evaluate these decisions from every possible angle, so that we felt really good about the process that we used, and very confident that September closure date is the optimal one for helping us manage the transition from this museum to the next.
And you talk about mission impact, which can obviously impact, your patrons, but I would guess it also at some level impacts things like fundraising, right? If you are closed, and I know you've got some efforts to remain visible during the closure, but certainly that impacts sort of the sense of this place and the way that it is able to reach patrons and partners. So how do you calculate that, the mission impact as a financial cost?
Yeah, that's really difficult, right? Because we're all sort of familiar with the idea of ROI, right? What's the return on investment for an expense? Return on mission is a harder thing to put numbers on. And so we think about how many people we can serve. We look for metrics like that. How many students are we putting through? How many Title I kids are coming and enjoying our programs? How many guests are coming on a regular weekend? How many dollars are we raising through fundraising? That's another metric of success. But you have to see that when it comes to fundraising in particular, there is this dynamic tension between the old museum and the new, because the closer we get to realizing the new museum vision, the less donors want to support the old museum and the more they would like to give to the capital program of the new museum. So at some point, they become in opposition to each other, and you really need to decide when is the optimal point to focus all of your fundraising, not on operations of the current museum, but on the creation of the new one.
And so you do have some partners. One of the facilities at MOSH that's going to be impacted is the planetarium, which has its own kind of special appeal, somewhat separate and apart from the exhibits. People go to it as a form of entertainment unto itself, but that will be closed when this museum closes. Things like the JEA Science Lab, which is, a place that is a destination for a lot of school kids who are learning about science, and obviously is a partnership with JEA. So how do you, first of all, address kind of separately the audiences that come to something like the planetarium, and then partners like JEA that have their name associated with certain parts of MOSH?
Yes. So we've had to talk to a lot of our community partners and sponsors and donors about how they're impacted by these sorts of decisions. We perhaps don't see the planetarium quite as separately from the rest of the museum's programming as you describe. It's one of many programs that we offer. We also have our Florida Naturalist Center, and as you correctly point out, the JEA Science Theater, where a lot of students come to learn. So yes, all of these programs are impacted, and we will have a period where we don't have a planetarium on site, although I can tease a little bit and tell you that we're working on an exciting mobile planetarium solution for the time that we're closed, that would allow us to continue to offer the sorts of programming that people have come to enjoy at the museum from a mobile platform while we're closed. So we've thought a lot about how we continue to deliver mission while we're not open to the public. But yeah, there's definitely an impact to the programs that people have come to know and love. If you've ever been to a laser show at the planetarium, it's kind of an old school thing, but the team has done some really creative things with sort of mixing that up. We used to do it with old school rock and roll, Pink Floyd, that sort of thing, and many of your listeners may have been to a Pink Floyd laser show at the planetarium. But these days we do it with Taylor Swift as well, and the guests just love it.
Tell us about some of the plans that you have. I know that you've said that there's going to be some pop-up events, and an effort to remain visible in the community. Can you give us some idea what those might look like, where those might take place, other than this, potentially traveling planetarium?
Yeah, so the obvious way is through vehicular outreach, right? So if you normally rely on the big yellow buses to bring the kids to the museum, we can now take the museum to the kids if we put programs and artifacts and talented staff and educators in a van and take it to the schools. And so there's a really great opportunity there. And actually, in many ways, that can help the schools that are struggling with funding for buses and difficulty getting onto field trips and so on. So if we can bring the programming to them, I expect that to continue to be part of the vibrant programming when we open the new museum. It is not just a stopgap measure for the period in between, but really a program we'd like to build up and have it be a vibrant part of the program. It also means you can reach a little further into the field, perhaps, than the metro counties, and you can take your program on the road.
I want to ask you, you said that, one of the difficult considerations, and I imagine it was a difficult bit of news to deliver, is the layoffs. There, I think, are currently about 30 people that work at MOSH, and it's my understanding that about 80% of the staff is being laid off, or has been laid off, or will be, I guess, when this is effective in September. Can you talk a little bit about the reaction of staff and how you delivered that news?
Yeah, so that was obviously the most difficult conversation for any of us. In fact, it was probably the most difficult conversation of my career, delivering that news to the team. When you're thinking about the health of an organization and you know that decision impacts real people and their real jobs and their real aspirations, that's tremendously hard. So for everybody involved in this process, that was the hardest part. But we're doing everything we can to make sure that the team is supported. We've got 4 months of normal operations before the museum closes. We try to give the team as much time as we can, and we've got a really robust sort of staff support plan in place to help folks find their next position. And there's some financial considerations as well when we close for the staff as well. So it is the most regrettable and difficult part of the whole process, but unfortunately necessary. When we think about the metamorphosis, it's always going to be a radical change, and that's going to affect people. It's unavoidable.
And are any of those employees that have been laid off going to be able to return to the new facility, or is that just too far down the road to even know?
No, it's really important for me that everybody understand that this is not a performance related. These people are not being fired; their positions are being eliminated along with the closure of the museum. So everybody who works at the museum presently will be eligible for rehire at the new museum in several years' time.
All right. If you're just joining us, we're talking to Al Dove. He is the CEO of the Museum of Science and History. We're talking about some big changes coming to the museum, and you can join the conversation. Give us a call at 904-549-2937 or email firstcoastconnect@wjct.org. You can also reach out on social media at FCC On Air. We have a call from Mark on the West Side. Good morning, Mark. Go ahead.
Good morning. I'm kind of bittersweet about the museum closing. I've spent thousands of hours there as a kid. The astronomy club I belonged to met there. The Star Trek club that I belonged to met there. I volunteered at the planetarium. I mean, I've just spent all kind of time there. So I hope we're on to bigger and better things. But I want to suggest something for you. There is anybody who's gone to public schools in Jacksonville know that the Huguenots were at Fort Caroline, and they got on a ship to go attack the people in St. Augustine, the Spaniards in St. Augustine, and a hurricane blew the fleet apart, and they never did, and then the Spaniards killed all the Huguenots. They found the shipwreck of that original journey, which is a foundational part of Jacksonville history. I mean, it really, really is. And they found it off the coast of Cape Kennedy, and it's about 100 yards off the beach. You could walk to it, and it's in very shallow water. And they found it and located it and did a little work on it a couple of years ago, but nobody's done anything with it yet since. And I'm not sure who it belongs to, or if it's you in the United States or the French government or whoever. But you really should look at maybe somehow acquiring a few bits and pieces, if not the whole darn thing, from that. Couldn't even begin to tell you how to start, but you should look it up. It's like I said, it's foundational to the history of Jacksonville, and that would be a center part, I think, of the new museum.
Interesting proposal. Thanks, Mark.
So that is a fantastic comment and question, and it is a wonderful story. Firstly, I just want to say I love it when I hear people say they've spent thousands of hours at the MOSH and they have fond memories of volunteering and attending. So that always warms my heart. But you're absolutely right. So the discovery of the Trinité, Ribault's ship that was blown off course from Jacksonville and ended up wrecking off the coast of Cape Canaveral, amazing discovery several years ago. Unfortunately, the shipwreck is not perhaps what we generally imagine as a shipwreck. It's not a single sort of intact hull. It's more of a debris field scattered over a huge area. And many of the artifacts have been sort of conglomerated into the sand these days. So it's not great for artifacts, but we will be pursuing those sorts of things as a story that needs to be told. I think St. Augustine does a wonderful job talking about the Spanish presence there. I think Jacksonville maybe could up its game when we talk about the French and their time here in Jacksonville. Either way you slice it, what an extraordinary maritime history we have in this part of the world. And, when I first came to Jacksonville and was thinking about the programming of the museum, I quickly changed from thinking about what stories do we include in the museum to thinking about what stories are we going to have to leave out because there's just not time and space within the museum to cover it all. This area really does have absolutely extraordinary history.
Sure. And a museum that's named for science and history isn't aiming for a small set of things to consider, right? It's a vast array of possibilities. So when you look at this future museum, what do you see as its defining characteristics?
So one of the things I'd really love to do in the new museum is to sort of unify the story. One of the problems with the current MOSH is that the exhibits have been put together over time, sort of piecemeal. So there isn't a single unifying narrative or a single arc or a single story message that you would like the guests to get by the time they finish their visit. We have this one-time opportunity in creating a new museum from scratch to decide what is the story we want to tell about the history and science and how those have shaped Northeast Florida. So we got a great opportunity to do that. I'd really like to start that conversation in the Mesozoic, which is many people would think of as the sort of dinosaur years, and go forward from there and have another more critical look at the way we tell the indigenous history of this area, and then go on into as humans come onto the scene and talk more about the culture and the evolution of the city that we see today around us. Not just this city, but also Southeast Georgia, all over Northeast Florida, and west, maybe as far as Tallahassee.
And your own area of scholarship is marine biology. Obviously, you're moving from the Southbank to the Northbank of the St. Johns River. Do you feel like the aquatic environment, the ocean, the river is going to be a larger part of that overall story that you're telling?
Yeah, that would be really tempting for me to play to the things that I like. And sure, there are marine stories that we need to tell. Actually, we already do. The Atlantic Tales, our first gallery that you walk into when you go to the museum, talks about the amazing marine coastal habitats here, and many students have done sleepovers under the whale that we have there. And so, those sorts of things are very important to me, that we continue to tell those stories. But I'd like to make sure that we cover the full natural and cultural history of this area, and we can't do that with just my expertise or the expertise of the people at the museum. It's too big a sprawling a story, as you point out. So our goal is to engage a whole stable of subject matter experts who can help us properly assemble and curate and contextualize all of the stories that go to make Jacksonville what it is today.
And so when does that happen? Crafting that narrative, deciding what the elements are, and sort of figuring out what the inside of this big new facility is going to be, how it's going to be divvied up.
Yeah, so that's already happening. So we're already, we have an exhibit designer, Ralph Applebaum Associates, that's designed many other museums and presidential libraries. They help us with the research and the design aspects of how do you do that. And all of that's happening at the same time as we're working with architects to decide what the building will look like, and landscape architects to decide what the park is going to look like, because of course the new museum will be embedded in a park that will surround the museum and connect to both the Northbank Riverwalk and the Emerald Trail. So it really will be a very special new location at the heart of that East Downtown area.
That part that you're describing sounds like the fun stuff. Right.
Oh, it's by far the best stuff. So for a nerd, self-confessed nerd like me, this is great. Like, I really enjoy helping use the sort of tools of narrative and how we understand science and how we understand history, and to create effective educational programming is really, I love that. And so that's the best part of the job. There are other parts too, of course, that are not as glamorous.
Right. We're talking to Al Dove. He's the CEO of the Museum of Science and History. They are planning to close in September for a little over 2 years as they prepare for their new location on the North Bank. If you've got questions about MOSH, its past, its future, give us a call at 904-549-2937 or email firstcoastconnect@wjct.org. Dr. Dove, I want to ask you about that. I mean, yeah, there's a lot of fun in planning this beautiful new facility. There's a lot of fundraising effort that is going into this. Can you, first of all, just tell us what benchmarks you're trying to hit at this point, and where you've come from so far. I mean, it began, I think, as Project Genesis several years ago, but things have changed since then, certainly, in terms of costs and expectations.
That's right. So it started out actually as MOSH 2.0 was the original name for the campaign for the new museum. Became MOSH Genesis sort of after the pandemic, and that's still the name we use for the capital campaign that goes with this project. We had some city mandated fundraising goals. So in order to sort of unlock the lease for the site, we needed to have raised $40 million by last summer, which we did. And at the moment, the campaign stands at about $95 million. That's enough to build the new building, which is one of the things that gave me and the board the confidence in the closure decision. We knew we had enough to proceed with construction of the building. It's not enough to finish the project because obviously you have to put exhibits and programs in the building as well. So there's additional fundraising that we need to carry on. And so we're going into a sort of next phase of the campaign while we continue to raise funds from parties interested in being part of this project. And we know there'll be certain people who are interested in joining us. Maybe when they see us break ground and the building starts to go up, they'll say, okay, this is really happening. So they'll want to be part of it at that time. But we'll take any interested parties who would like to help us with this project. It really is a chance to be part of something really special.
What number is it that you carry in your head?
So we think the total is probably close to $150 million. Which is more than we would have discussed perhaps 5 years, 6 years ago. But we had this period of sort of unprecedented inflation, and now there's a lot of uncertainty in the market around construction as well. So, these are things that they're very much living documents and living numbers, and we revisit these things all the time, constantly evaluating how much do we think we can raise, how much do we think we can spend, how much do we think we can cut from this project or that part of the project. So it's a very dynamic conversation, and very much feels like you're building the bike while you're riding it.
Dynamic is a nice way to put it. I mean, I feel like it must be a little agonizing to be in the project planning stage for something like this, actively fundraising and just watching costs skyrocket, whether it's, post-pandemic, lumber costs or, the cost of labor or anything else that's associated with construction, or even now tariffs, just seeing all of these potential expenses just rising.
Yeah, that definitely, those are the 2:00 in the morning sort of moments, right, for me, where I sort of wake up thinking about that. But what actually gets me through the night and what gets me through the next days is who we have doing this. We have the most amazing consortium of folks. We know the city is super supportive. The state of Florida has been supportive. The corporate residents of Jacksonville, the philanthropic residents of Jacksonville, average residents of Jacksonville, everybody wants to have vibrant cultural institutions. Everybody wants to have a new museum where they can come with their family, create great memories, have a great time, learn things about the history of the place and the potential future wonders that we might come up with in this part of the world. And all of that, everybody being unified towards that goal gives me confidence that we'll get there.
You worked 17 years at the Georgia Aquarium, and a lot of people have always said, well, we should have an aquarium. If we had an aquarium like the Georgia Aquarium, we would have this huge, tourism surge. Has there been any pressure ever to try to incorporate something like that in the Museum of Science and History?
No, not pressure. I mean, people have asked me about it. I think it's an obvious question when you come from a public aquarium background that people would think about that. But I also had sort of an academic background before the public aquarium, so I think of myself as a very broadly trained scientist and conservationist, and so that hasn't been a pressure. People should be aware that public aquariums are fiendishly expensive. If you think this museum sounds expensive, building a world-class aquarium these days, you're talking about a $500 million project or more. They are very, very, very expensive.
Just to build, I imagine operating is not cheap either.
Not cheap either.
Yeah.
So.
We've got a call from Ray in Riverside. Good morning, Ray. Go ahead.
Yes, my name is Ray, and I'm from the Riverside area. I'm a big fan of museums. I'm a big historian, and I have been listening to your program this morning, and I'm troubled by one thing that I don't think is being adequately answered. And that's why can't this new facility and this new mobile program be underway while the old facility and structure and program is also being run? To shut down the whole operation for more than 2 years sounds totally unreasonable to me. And so I would like you guys to together to answer that. why do you shut down for 2 years? I've, in my professional life, been involved with many transitions and growths of businesses, and we would never consider that possibility. That's my question.
Yeah.
Thanks, Ray.
I understand the question, and I understand people's concerns about the closure. Just to be clear, we already do conduct vehicular outreach. So we do take programming out in an education van at the moment. What we're talking about is creating a newer and bigger one that is more capable and allows us to reach further into the community and reach more partners and reach more students that way. That is going to be a vibrant part of our programming. There's no doubt about it, but it won't be the only part. As to the questions of why close so long, I think we touched on many of those sort of issues earlier when we were talking about the need to balance the mission, the money, and the need to focus energies on the creation of the new museum. But we should also not underestimate how much work there is to do to exit the building we're currently in. We have to take all of the collections that people don't see that are behind the scenes, properly archive those, and get them into storage while we do the design and construction of the new museum. So there's just a lot of steps that have to happen, and sometimes the old museum and the new museum's needs are at loggerheads. So we have really carefully thought about this. I really need to emphasize how we've evaluated this process and thought about it over the last 6 months, and really do feel very confident that that's the right date. But our goal would be to minimize disruption to the public in terms of the services that we can provide through that vehicle outreach program, and by popping up at community events, and by working with many of our wonderful partners in the community who, I can't tell you after our announcement how many of the cultural institutions reached out to me and said, hey, this is a big decision and we stand ready to help you share your stories, and if you need space or if you need programming partners, we're happy to continue to do that.
We have an email from Ricardo that sort of echoes what Ray just had to say. He says, terrible decision. Jax can spend $800 million on a stadium, but let the Science Museum wither. My son is a teenager now, but we visited many times when he was younger. I hate that a whole bunch of kids are going to miss this experience during such a long closure. Have you been fielding a lot of, I know you say that there's a lot of people in the cultural community, certainly like your board members, and a lot of support from your financial backers, but I'm guessing you're getting a lot of these emails and calls as well.
Yeah, we get calls, and we get the opposite call too, which is other people saying, well, it's about time we built a new museum for the city. So we hear every perspective, and I am very sympathetic to the folks who are upset about the closure and have fond memories of coming and would like their kids or grandkids to be able to experience that themselves. All I can tell you is that we will continue to strive to provide service during the closure period. And when we open the new museum experience, it will be all the better for our having focused our energies on creating the most amazing museum experience we can.
I did just want to talk, prior to coming to MOSH, you've got a long history in education, a long history, obviously, working in the aquarium, a lot of scientific research into the ocean and marine life, and a lot of, evaluation of the risks that plastic pollution poses. And I just think you have, you've done a couple of TED Talks where you sort of address the threat of plastic pollution. One stat in particular, you kind of talk about, within 10 years, there's going to be this weight of plastic versus the weight of total fish in the ocean. Can you just sort of tell us about, how you present that, what you try to tell people about that threat in particular?
Yeah, so the metric you're talking about came from an Ocean Conservancy report about the state of plastic pollution inputs into the ocean. And it was the first report that really tried to get their arms around how much plastic is going into the ocean every year. And that is a terrifying amount. And you can think of it as a full garbage truck dumping into the ocean every second around the world. But it is a huge amount of plastic, and the persistence of those plastics in the ocean is a threat to wildlife. So, how do we balance that against our desire to have, oceans replete with diverse marine life? It's very difficult. And in many cases, we don't know the answers to what is the impact of all of that plastic, but I think it's a safe assumption that it's probably not good. So.
And I think that in that TED Talk that you gave, you said that for every 3 pounds of fish, there'd be a pound of plastic.
That's right. So
yeah.
That's the figure from the Ocean Conservancy. Wonderful organization doing great work to help understand the impacts of climate and plastics and overfishing on the oceans.
And so your best advice for people who are, kind of living in this world and seeing this happening and I think feeling, somewhat like that's not within their control.
Oh, it's within everybody's control. We can all do something about that. It is a simple consumer choice to choose things that are not in not in plastic packaging, or to choose plastic packaging that is more recyclable than others. We know, for example, a PET bottle, like a soda bottle, is much more recyclable than a plastic chip packet. Those are lined with foil, which makes the plastic not recyclable. So there are consumer decisions that we can make that help us minimize the impact. Eliminating your impact is very, very hard. We still live in a society that values these materials, and they are useful. It's just that there's a big mismatch between the duty cycle of the product, which is you use for as long as it takes you to drink that soda, and the lifespan of the product, which then continues in the environment for hundreds of years. So we've got to right size the durability of the product to match how long we want to use it for. So.
Well, Dr. Al Dove, it's a pleasure having you on. Thanks so much for coming on the program, and best of luck with the move in the months ahead.
Thank you so much. We're so excited at the museum to bring a new experience to the city. It's going to be wonderful.
All right. Up next, an initiative that aims to get a new partnership between the Jacksonville Sheriff's Office and local elder and disability advocacy groups aims to get ahead of missing persons cases before they happen. Here to tell us about the program and its signature bloodhound is Jonetta Buxton. She's a retired detective and member of the JSO Missing Persons Unit. Good morning, Jonetta.
Good morning.
We're also joined by Linda Levin, CEO of Elder Source. Welcome back, Linda.
Thank you. Good morning.
So, Jonetta, I'm saying this is a new program, and in fact, it's not really. It is kind of an expansion of an existing program that JSO has. But this is called the Pepper Project, named after a bloodhound named Pepper. What is Pepper trained to do?
Yes, it is a branch of resources that we had previously. Pepper is trained to sniff the scent that we obtain from our scent kit, and it's designed for Pepper and Patriot. We have two bloodhounds designed to follow that person in which they travel.
Yeah, and so Pepper, as you say, is a bloodhound. Patriot is one that's already doing this work.
A very seasoned bloodhound, yes.
What is it about? I mean, we kind of hear bloodhounds, and we know that they're known to be tracking dogs, but is there something special about the way that they're made or built that allows them to be better at tracking?
Well, without being a canine officer or having been trained, what I know from a layman's standpoint, that they have a impeccable sense of smell and direction.
Yeah. And Linda, as we said, this is sort of an expansion of an existing project, all built around the idea of making sure that if somebody goes missing, somebody that has perhaps dementia or Alzheimer's, or in the case of somebody with just an intellectual disability,
Correct.
that this can help make it easier to find them.
Yes, absolutely. And that's why our board and Elder Source decided to sponsor Pepper and also purchase kits that we can distribute. And the scent kits are used to collect the scent from the person with Alzheimer's or dementia or autism, that Pepper, if that person goes missing, or Patriot, can go out, get the scent with the handler, and then track that person's scent to find them and hopefully find them safely and return them home.
And so this begins with a scent kit, which I think is a fairly new creation. I mean, it's not something that existed certainly, 20 years ago. And the idea is that people really do have a distinctive, unique scent, every person.
Yes, apparently.
as distinctive as a fingerprint.
Yeah, that's what I'm told. And what's beautiful about Pepper or Patriot is, as a bloodhound, and I learned this from the officers at JSO, is their ability to really zero in on that person's scent. And Pepper, if you get to meet Pepper, is just a sweet bloodhound. She's not frightening, she's not scary or intimidating. So inviting and making whoever she's looking for comfortable.
Why is that important? I mean, explain, having a dog that looks approachable and kind and sweet as opposed to maybe one that's a little bit more imposing.
Well, I think for someone, especially, well, anybody, but especially someone with dementia or a child with an intellectual disability, you don't want a dog that's going to be aggressive or appear aggressive. You want somebody, or a dog, talk to her as a somebody,
Right.
a dog that's going to be soft and friendly and approachable so that they feel comfortable going with the officers and being returned home.
So I want to ask about kind of the process for the search, but before I do, I mean, Linda, what is the problem of people wandering off?
Well, people with dementia or with an intellectual developmental disability like autism, they do tend to wander. People with dementia, 60% will wander at least once and often more than once. If they want to get out and walk, they're going to get out and walk, but they get lost easily because they don't have the memory of where they are. And sometimes they think they're in an old neighborhood where they moved from. And so they're looking and they get lost, and then they're at risk of getting sick or injured or dying. And so finding them as quickly as possible is essential. Children are drawn to water. There's so much water here. And so, we want to get to them quickly. And having the kit, and Janetta can tell you about Revamp, having them registered and Revamp with the JSO helps the officers get to them that much more quickly. So hopefully we're saving lives.
Right. So part of the goal of this program, Janetta, is to kind of make people aware of the Revamp program, which requires a little legwork at the front end in order to avoid possible delays and sometimes really significant delays if there's an emergency. Can you sort of explain what the Revamp program does and is?
Yes, but before I do that, can I say a couple things about the scent kit before we move on?
Absolutely.
So with the scent kit, of course, it's what Ms. Levin stated, that our bloodhound will travel in the path that person takes. The scent kit is good for 10 years. It can't be frozen. It can't be left in extreme heat. It takes less than a minute to provide that scent kit to the family. And so we want anyone that has a cognitive issue of any kind, be it Alzheimer, dementia, Down syndrome, traumatic brain injury, to give us a call. As you stated, it's very specific. Our scent is just like our fingerprints. It can't be changed. We don't have to worry about using a battery, anything of that nature. Well, it will not work due to whether we wear our scent. When we wake up in the morning, when we lay down, we have that same scent. And so moving on to the Revamp program. So our Revamp program is probably one of the most essential things that we have, because our Revamp program is for people, as I said earlier, with cognitive issues, right? It's a program where we're designed to obtain all pertinent information before the night of that incident. If you can imagine, if your loved one wanders away, you're stressed. The last thing you want is a bunch of officers or detectives browbeating you with a plethora of questions, right? You're probably saying to yourself, why are you asking me so many questions? Go out and find my family members, and maybe not in such a nice manner, right? And so the program is designed to ask the pertinent information, such as when were they diagnosed? What are they diagnosed with? What type of medication? How is it that we should approach them? Because that's very important too, because if they have certain sensory issues, or if they are even scared of a dog. So there are certain things that we will do to try to make that person comfortable, right? Also, it helps us to know whether that person is walking with a walker or have some sort of disability, because it will help us to know, well, how far possibly did they travel? So again, all those things are important. And all the information that we receive from the family member is covered by HIPAA, right? It's housed with the city. We have the same compliance as a medical personnel. You can't provide information outside of first responders, right? Which is police and firefighters. And it's also, we have to fall in line with CGIC regulations, right? Which is similar to HIPAA.
So it's confidential, essentially, the information that you provide. It's not something that you're disseminating as an agency to anyone else.
Absolutely. Only to first responders, and only when we're utilizing it to try to locate that person. All the information that we obtain from the Revamp registry, as well as the scent kit, we'll attach it to a premise. A premise is notification on your home address. So if we get a call from that person saying that your family member has run away, the officer knows, our dispatch knows to contact the missing person unit, and other people that are listed on our premise.
So that dispatcher will know that they can immediately send out that crew, the dog, the missing person.
Immediately,
Mhm.
yes, immediately. And all this information is available on hand. And so just to give you an example, if I have a moment. So when we ask the family members not only pertinent information about their medical, we also ask them what places do they like to go? Where do they like to hang out? So while that dispatcher is dispatching that call, we have officers going to those favorite places, park, waters, and all of the things to help us to locate that person.
And we should say REVAMP stands for Registry for Endangered, Vulnerable, and Missing Persons. And we'll remind you at the end of this segment, but there are links at ElderSource. There's links at JSO.
Jack's Ready.
And Jack's Ready as well, the city's Jack's Ready website. So this is, it requires a little bit of assistance. These scent kits are very helpful to law enforcement and certainly to the bloodhounds, but they have to be collected in a certain way. They're not just something that you can sort of freestyle. So if people are wanting to participate in the registry, can you give us some idea, like how long does it take? How do they go about making that contact? Do they have to go somewhere? Are they doing the collection themselves? How does that all work?
So in reference to the registry, you can go to Jack's Ready, or you can reach out to ElderSource and Agent True, which is a partner with ElderSource. As far as the scent kit, we will issue, we being ElderSource, Agent True, or someone from the missing person unit, or myself. And simply, it's a kit. It has a glass jar, a gauze inside, a placard with the person's information, and a seal. And so simply we'll don on gloves, we'll take that gauze and wipe the person's maybe underneath their arms or their back, depending on their sensitivity. We'll then put that gauze inside the jar, seal it, put the placard, which it contains their name, their age, and where we collected the scent and the date. And that's important because I said that it's good for 10 years. And we'll seal the lid. And we tell the family they can put it in a cool, dry place. Again, it can't be frozen. It can't be left in extreme heat. And we also tell them if, for whatever reason, the jar is compromised, someone opens it, to call us. Don't try to reseal it, but call us because we don't want a contaminated scent.
And so that is where people can, get this. They do store it at their own house. And in your experience, Linda, I mean, how helpful is this for families in that moment of crisis?
Oh, it's tremendous. I mean, it just saves time when officers have something that the dog can track. It's so much more, such a much more quick response and greater likelihood of finding that person, whether it's an adult with dementia or a child with an intellectual disability.
And without that registry, I mean, you really are going to just have a patrol officer coming, asking a lot of questions, and maybe sending an investigator, asking more questions, as opposed to just having the missing persons people come and begin the search.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And the resources that it takes to go find a missing person without the scent kit and the dog are significantly greater because they have nothing to work with, right? Some information maybe they're getting from the family, but they're going to pile in all kinds of resources when they can use the dog and the handler and move more quickly.
Yeah.
To get the scent kit, again, you can get it at ElderSource. You need to bring your person with you for us to issue the scent kit and register them in.
Terrell Hogan Law.
I'm Wayne Hogan. Lawsuits involving strokes are complicated and require a special understanding of these life-changing events.
More at terrellhoganlaw.com. Life South Community Blood Centers, providing blood and patient services to the local hospitals, serving patients in this community. Donating blood with Life South helps save lives. More at lifesouth.org to find a blood drive near you.
On the next Fresh Air, actor Danny McBride talks about the final season of HBO's The Righteous Gemstones and his journey from Hollywood to South Carolina, where he co-founded Rough House Pictures. He'll tell us about how he's built a unique comic empire, blending sharp satire with Southern charm. Join us.
Today at noon on WJCT News 89.9.
The president is one of the industry's biggest cheerleaders. Trump's team wants to bring digital finance into the mainstream, but how much is he and his family already profiting directly from crypto? We'll flip that coin next time on 1A.
Today, starting at 10 on WJCT News 89.9.
Welcome back. It's a classic film that inspired generations of others, from Pretty Woman to Trading Places. Here to talk about the stage musical are the two stars of My Fair Lady, actor Gary Lee Weber, who plays the pompous phonetics professor Henry Higgins. Good morning, Gary.
Good morning.
We're also joined by Sophia Smith, who plays the Cockney flower girl Eliza Doolittle. Good morning, Sophia.
Good morning.
So, I'm curious what it's like to perform in such a classic. I mean, this is, My Fair Lady, but based on Pygmalion. It's been, stage, screen, back on stage. Were you fans of any of those iterations coming into this performance, or familiar with them, or was this kind of your first exposure?
Well, I have loved musical theater my whole life, but this show in particular for a very long time. My girls grew up listening to the CD every night, listening to Julie Andrews sing it every night when they were going to bed. And we watched the movie regularly. And so had the chance to direct it about 30 years ago.
Oh, wow.
So the chance to play the role is just a real dream.
Yeah. How about you, Sophia?
No, totally. I had actually watched the movie when I got my phone call about being cast and everything. And I had watched it prior, and it was a long show. It was a long movie, but I loved every minute of it. And it's wonderful to see Audrey take something on like that. And I had listened to Julie do the cast album and everything. So having those two ladies to watch and to look up to have been really amazing. So I definitely have been a fan of those two for a while.
Yeah, and not too shabby. You've got Julie Andrews.
Oh, yeah.
You've got, what is that difficult to kind of take on a role that's so iconic, has had,
Yeah.
such famous people portray this character?
It's a little intimidating when you have two iconic ladies like that, doing it before you. But it definitely, I feel like it gives me a good starting point. Also to look at different interpretations that the two of them have had, because I think Julie and Audrey both have a little bit of different interpretations. Julie's a bit sassier than I would say Audrey is. So it's been cool being able to draw from the two of them, but also start to put a little bit of myself in there, just like I'm sure the two of them did for both the stage and the screen adaptation.
And I can just tell you that Sophia does a great job playing the role all on her own.
Yeah.
And she does a beautiful job portraying such a classic role.
I mean, so it's classic. I will have to say there's certain parts of it that are problematic, certainly like in the modern era, right? We're kind of looking at this somewhat misogynistic professor. He's got like some feelings about women in general. There's certain characteristics of class that are maybe, considered a little outdated. So does the staging address that at all? Or do you feel as a performer that you've got to address it at all? Or is it just okay to take the classic script and go with it?
Well, that's been a challenge because, of course, I'm the one delivering most of those misogynistic lines, and I often feel bad as I'm looking at Sophia saying some of this, but I think the way Rex Harrison played the role, another iconic actor, and the way people have come to understand it, what you realize is at the end of the show, it is Eliza who is changing Higgins, not the other way around. Everything about Eliza's transformation is somewhat superficial, but really what's going on with Higgins is an internal change. And so I think that softens it when you realize that there's a heart change going on, and trying to play the role in such a way that people feel that they like this guy, even though they don't like what he's doing or how he's treating her. That's a real challenge. But Rex Harrison did it so well. And I think people understand what the show is about.
Right.
And they understand that this is the flaw in the character, but you see him transformed over the course of his relationship with Eliza.
And so even when this was staged, or in the film version, there was an understanding that there was something that needed fixing about Henry Higgins, right? It was not like, okay.
Oh, it's fairly obvious from the beginning something's wrong with the guy.
Oh, yes. and I think, too, Todd, our director, has given me plenty of room to definitely stand up to Higgins.
Yes.
Which is great. So we do have the bit of the problematic themes in there, but there's plenty of room for the women, especially with the misogyny, to address it. And also the class distinctions, too. I think everybody in the cast does a really great job of approaching it from hey, this is a problem, and we're calling it out, and we're not letting it slide. We're definitely standing up to it, which is great.
Well, and I think that's what the art and theater do well, is they sort of highlight some of the underlying problems that are pretty subtle, but when you highlight it like this on the stage, you see it and you're like, oh, I don't want to see that in myself or in other people. So
Mhm.
I do think at the end of the day, it's actually helpful to bring these subjects to the light.
Do you have a favorite song, a favorite part of the performance that just kind of continues to sustain you and bring you joy when you're performing?
I think I think most everybody would probably expect me to say I could have danced all night, but I have a lot of fun with the two. There's one that I sing when I'm still Cockney, called Just You Wait, which is very fun. That definitely has Eliza getting quite mad at Higgins and is really taking center stage and saying, no, I'm not, I don't want to put up with this. I want, like, if you're going to treat me poorly, then I'm going to do the exact same thing to you. But then my other favorite one is Without You, and that's right at the end of the show. And it definitely is a huge, like, independent moment for Eliza. I mean, it is the song's title. Like, she's basically telling him, I can do everything that you think that I can't without you, and don't you think for a second that I can't, which is wonderful.
Yeah, I think for me, I've grown accustomed to her face, which is the last song in the show, and it really shows his transformation, I think, as he's really fighting within himself what he sees in Eliza and how he's come to love her.
Mhm.
Well, the show opens May 15th. It runs through June 22nd. Tickets are available at alhambrajax.com. It's so nice to meet you, Gary Lee Weber, Sophia Smith. Congrats, and break a leg.
Thank you very much.
All right. And that's our program. Thank you for listening. If you have feedback or suggestions, you can send either to First Coast Connect at WJCT.org. The executive producer of First Coast Connect is David Luckin. Our show is produced by Stacey Bennett and directed by Brady Corum. Our theme music is performed by Club de Belugas. Join us tomorrow when we ask Jacksonville Mayor Donna Deegan about the latest city business and take your calls and questions in our monthly Ask the Mayor segment.
Support for First Coast Connect is provided by Baptist Health and the North Florida TPO.
Baptist Health is a proud supporter of First Coast Connect. Baptist Health, committed to building a healthier community for all of us. More info at 202-4YOU or baptistjax.com. The North Florida TPO is dedicated to transportation planning, funding, clean fuels, and new technologies for a vibrant, resilient, and connected region. More information available at northfloridatpo.com. The City of Jacksonville presents the Jacksonville Jazz Festival, featuring The Roots, Janelle Monáe, Kool and the Gang, and more. Memorial Day weekend, May 22nd to 25th at Tailgaters Parking in downtown Jacksonville. Information at jacksonvillejazzfest.com.
This is WJCT News 89.9 Jacksonville. Up next, national and local news from NPR and the WJCT News team.